Here at Win Talk Radio, our heart is to encourage people and give them hope. As Christians and conservatives, we spend so much time focusing on the negative and what the left is doing and what the Democrats are doing, when the reality is God is moving powerfully, and we see it everywhere we go. He's waking up people, opening their eyes to the truth. And so the very reason, or the very thing that we see as a negative, that the media is not showing us the positive proves that we are winning the day. And so we just want to encourage you to take a stand, take a fight, speak boldly, because people are listening and God is opening eyes. And so the reality is when we show up, we win, and God will win the day through his people when we do it together in unity.
Welcome to Win Talk Radio, where you will learn how to talk truth and take action. Hosted by WIN, Women Impacting the Nation. Join your hosts, Sue Trombino, founder and president of WIN, Debbie Healy, public policy advisor for Faith, Family, and Freedom, Carrie Campos, co-founder of Self-Evident Ministry, and Jannique Stewart, founder of Love Protects Ministry and speaker with Life Training Institute. For more information about WIN Talk Radio, go to our website at womenimpactingthenation.org. Because remember, when we show up, we win.
And welcome to Win Talk Radio. We are so glad to be here with you today. I'm Debbie Healy. I'm one of the hosts on Win Talk Radio. I'm joined with Jannique Stewart, co-host, and our fearless leader, Sue Trombino, founder and president of Women Impacting the Nation. Our other co-host, Carrie Campos, can't be with us today. She's actually in Texas fighting the fight. We're just glad to be here with you. Our goal is to talk truth and to take action. And today's topic is going to be transgenders and what is happening in our culture and our society today. What is happening to our families, our faith, and our freedoms when we see the assault of the LGBTQRS whatever movement and how it is affecting our children and our lives. So we want to open with transgenders, and so much confusion is out there. What exactly is transgenderism? What is that ideology? And Jannique, you are traveling weekly into these college campuses. You're going to schools, you're talking to students, and they are dealing with this transgender agenda. What exactly is that ideology?
You know, I'm actually glad you asked, because whenever I'm speaking, a lot of times there is confusion, because there's the term transgender, but then there's also transgenderism, and I think it's really important to be able to distinguish the difference. Transgender is the individual who is truly suffering because they struggle with what's called gender confusion or gender dysphoria. That means they are uneasy with the body, their biological body. They're uneasy with that, and psychologically they feel they are of the opposite sex, or so to speak, gender. Now, again, that's transgender. Think of it this way: transgender tends to deal with the psychology, okay, the mental anguish that they're going through. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum is what's called the transgenderism, or the transgenderism ideology. These are the activists. These are the ones that are actually the woke part of that woke culture that are actually trying to influence, affect our laws. They're the ones going into the schools trying to indoctrinate young people. So there is two separate terms that sound very similar, but they do represent different people. Now, the reason why I think that is important to differentiate, transgender individuals, number one, they are a neighbor. As we're called to love all of our neighbors.
Yes.
But it is a small percentage of the population, and most of them are not interested in the ideological war of trying to be activists and trying to advocate the way the transgender ideologues are doing. So a lot of times they're like, we don't even want to be a part of this. Like, they're struggling themselves. And so that's why I do think it's important that whenever we talk about this kind of an issue, that we do have compassion, because a lot of times we think they're the ones that are pushing all these crazy laws, and it's not.
You know what? You make an
They're the
excellent point. That's where the loud, left who's trying to run their agenda, and they ruin it for these people who really, like you say, they do need help, and they are asking for help. Where is this, when we hear there's like 72 different genders, what is that?
So yes, so not necessarily 72 different genders, but 72 sexual attractions and identities. Okay, now we know that, for example, with Facebook has anywhere between, they definitely have well over 60. There's some dating apps and dating sites that have 111. Okay, so we definitely see all these different descriptions, and to be quite honest with you, nobody really even knows what half of them even mean. But unfortunately, there is this agenda that's going on, and what's most important is this is what's being taught to children. Now, let's go back to the transgenderism. One of the issues right now is this whole ideology. Now, going back to the gender dysphoria. Generally speaking, gender dysphoria tends to present in children, normally boys, between the ages of 2 to about 4 years old. And that's where they have that gender confusion, gender dysphoria. Of course, it can be treated at that age. Now, unfortunately, with this other agenda that's coming in, they believe in socially transitioning the children at that young age. So that means if your 2-year-old identifies or is saying, "Mommy, I think I want to be a boy, I think I want to be a girl," and sometimes it is simply because a young lady who feels like she's a tomboy, or a little boy that maybe does like the color pink, and automatically now everyone is up in arms thinking, "Oh my gosh, transgender, we need to take him to," and what's actually called their gender transition clinics. Did you all know that now there are more than 50 gender transition clinics across the United States that have just popped up? Literally within just a couple of years, they've popped up across the country. And this is where we see this being forced and hoisted upon these children. Not to mention, they're being indoctrinated in the school system, where they're actually asking children, "Do you want to be a boy or do you want to be a girl?" And letting them know that gender has nothing to do with your biology, but everything to do with how you think. So when we do think of the transgender terminology, I want you to think of it this way. What we have now is a worldview that has split the human person. And even though God has given us, now we talk about that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. What we see is an assault on an image bearer of God, because what they're essentially saying is that our body does not matter. That I am not my body, I am however I feel. So there literally is, it's actually called body self dualism, where the physical body, which God gave us for a reason, God gave us private parts for a reason, and they're like a sign, they're like a compass that is supposed to orient us to who we are. And so what's happened now is they've come in and split and said, nope, your biological sex has nothing to do with your gender identity. And now they've elevated gender identity, however it is that you feel, again, it's feelings over facts. And now they've said that is what determines if you are male or female.
Which is why it is so important in this spiritual battle, which is what this is, that we consistently speak truth. You know, it's interesting, you know, you talked about the little children. I can remember my daughter when she was 4 years old, she had an older brother, our son was older, and she just worshiped that boy. And everything he discarded from a clothing perspective, I would see her walking around with his soccer shorts, with his soccer t-shirts. I mean, that was just what she did. Now, back then, I just patted her on the head and said how cute she loves her brother. Now she's a lovely, you know, 27-year-old woman. Now, fast forward today, if that happened, these parents would be, and I believe it's because of the propaganda that they're hearing, The false information they're getting, they automatically assume, uh-oh, she really should be a boy, let's take her to the doctors. And what you said about these these clinics, we are actually hearing that Planned Parenthood has transitioned quite a bit of their health care now to go after these young children. And we're hearing stories of young girls, teenage girls, prepubescent girls going into Planned Parenthood having testosterone parties because it's kind of like the in thing to do, not realizing this is long-term life altering.
Absolutely.
What they're doing to their bodies.
You know, it's funny that you're mentioning, because I'm sitting here listening to you all, and I'm thinking to myself, who came up with this? How did this get to be so big and so all of a sudden in everybody's face? And then all of a sudden everybody, this is why it's so vital that we as Christians and as, you know, for moral Americans, that we really understand, especially Christians, that where does our identity come from? It doesn't come from, I mean, people are going into becoming cats, and I mean, this is like unbelievable when you start looking at what's happening. But
Sure.
I'm like, who, really, I would love to know who just started all this, that all of a sudden, again, you have the media, the propaganda, and all that
Well,
kind
it
of stuff.
actually goes back to the 1950s, 60s, because you see, we wake up and we see these headlines, and it's almost like we feel we're seeing this in the past couple of years. But the reality is, this has been going on since the 1950s, 60s, and it actually in the United States started with a physician, Dr. John Money, who, it was a set of twins, and when they were doing the circumcision on one of the twins, they actually mutilated his private parts, and they decided to actually change him to a girl and never let him know. So there was two twins.
Oh, I remember that.
Yes.
I remember
so they
that.
changed him and never told him that he was actually a boy. So they called him Brenda. They transitioned, gave hormones, all of that. And they were trying to say, see, it's all about gender identity. But the reality is when they finally did tell him, immediately he went back because he was never comfortable as Brenda, because that's not who he really was. So he did end up trying to transition back to the male, and then a couple of years later, about 10 years later, he ended up committing suicide. And so this is a very serious thing, but yes, it does trace its roots all the way back there, and more importantly, it is an identity crisis.
It is.
And when we don't know who we are in Christ and who God designed us to be, that's why there will be a continuous assault on an image bearer of God.
It is. And it is this spiritual battle that's out there. And it's a heavy topic to take. And we just want to encourage you all. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back and continue our topic on the transgenders and the effect they're having in our society.
At Win Talk Radio, we talk truth so we can take action. And whenever I think of what that means, I really think of the sons of Issachar in 1 Chronicles 12, where it says they understood the times and they knew what they should do. I think right now in our country, most people, they don't understand the times, therefore they don't know what they should do. To really understand the times that we're in is to recognize, number one, that truth is under assault. And because truth is under assault, it impacts our moral compass. Our moral compass is shaken up, it's broken kind of like a snow globe. And ultimately what we see going on is life. There is a complete reckless disregard for human life. When we can kill the unborn to the tune of almost 1 million every single year, that should give every single one of us great pause. And that's not just some people's issue, that is every single one of our issue. Because the most important, inalienable right that we have is the right to life. But it isn't just life that's under assault. Our religious freedom and liberties are under assault. Even when it comes to just the idea of truth, when children are being taught that you can choose your sex, or that there are over 100 different genders, or maybe when our children are being taught about critical race theory and that every single white person is a racist, because this whole idea that racism is everywhere at all times. and that there are those who are oppressed and those that are the oppressors. We need to understand the times and we need to know what to do. You see, that also means that they understood action was required. We have a moral responsibility, a moral obligation to not just talk about it, to not just complain, but to also take action. That's why at WIN, we talk truth so we can all take action.
Welcome back to WIN Talk Radio, Women Impacting the Nation. We have been talking about transgenderism within our culture, and right now we just kind of want to go a little step further, really just to paint the picture of what's happening out there. And I know, Sue, this past weekend you met a dad that's having some struggles with his twin boys. Can you share a little bit about what's happening?
Yes, his name is Jeff, and he's from Texas. Actually, you all can go, and I would highly recommend going on to Facebook and checking out. It's called Save James, and obviously we won't get into the in-depth of what's happening because it's a very big deal. But apparently this gentleman was married to a gal who's a pediatrician. I'm not sure, there's a lot of things that she went off the deep rails, but they had twins. And she has chosen to take one of those boy twins and make him a girl. So the legal battles that he has encountered for 6 years trying to stand for his little boy is absolutely beyond the pale. I mean, I'm just blown away by just listening to this man. And he has had to stand because even the courts have said that, no, you have to call your little boy a girl. And the wife, who's a pediatrician, that's why you really have to know who you're taking your children to, but they refuse to call him a boy when he's at her house, and she makes him dress up as a little girl. He comes over to his dad's house, and he's out there doing karate and all that kind of stuff and being a boy. And but I just, there's so much to this story that I really would really encourage everybody to go to Save James on Facebook, and some people aren't on Facebook, but it's the proverbial frog in the pot. Just because somebody says this is it doesn't mean it's so. And so I think we have to get back to what is truth. And truth is, God made us male and female. You may feel like something, you may feel like, you're Debbie, you may feel like Dave, but you are fearfully and wonderfully made. God made you. He knew you were before you were even born. He knew every hair on your head, Debbie. I know you feel like, Dave, but you really are Debbie. And so that's truth and love. And we've got to stand up in love, because this is so much confusion, but it's a satanic, it's a satanic battle, obviously, but this is a satanic war on our children, our culture, and we have got to stand up for truth with this, because this is, just go to Save James on Facebook, because it is amazing what this man has gone to. He spent, from what he said, $100,000 just on fighting for haircuts, because she wants to make sure his hair is long, and he's like, no, he's a boy, his hair is going to be short. And it was amazing to see men in this room standing and thanking this dad for standing for truth. We don't have to kowtail, because we really are the majority. And it's the silent majority that, we're the silent majority. That's why things like this are happening. So we really need to start standing for what is truth, what is God's truth, and He made us male and female. But that's just one example, and I know Jannique is...
Yes. Now, let's think about that for a second, because, again, what's being told to children in the school is, first they're asking, what would you like to be called? They're using this whole pronoun therapy, so to speak, where they're conditioning them to even believe that you can be all these different pronouns. Now they're even introducing additional pronouns like they. Exactly. And taking a singular, which we know singular, he or she, and now they're wanting to use they, which has always meant plural. And so now that to me is even confusing to children. But if we go back to the Holy Scriptures, everything goes back to the garden, everything goes back to Genesis, where He says, in the image of God, He made them male and female.
That's right.
Not male, female, and not 3, not 10, not 50, not 100. Now, that said, I do think that's important to clarify. But here's what I also, going back to the individual that's concerned, there are a couple of ways that we can actually have conversations with people to help them understand why we do not elevate feelings over facts, which is what we were talking about in the first segment. Think about when someone has dysphoria, such as an eating disorder. In fact, Dr. Paul McHugh, who was the psychiatrist in chief for the first and the premier hospital that actually did gender transition surgeries, he would actually use that example. He says when a young woman is struggling with anorexia, which is a type of body dysmorphic disorder, we don't say, you know what, you are fat. I know you're only 95 pounds. You really are fat, so we should just go on and affirm that lie. No, because we love them, we help them see the truth and help them come into truth with the reality, because that's what it is. It's an assault on truth and the very nature of reality. So when someone is struggling with their gender identity, we do not need to affirm that lie. They're in confusion. The most loving thing we can do is tell them the truth, because love rejoices in the truth. It doesn't affirm lies. And in fact, let's ask ourselves this question, and I like to challenge young people whenever I'm speaking, and I'll say, listen, is there any other place, is there any other circumstance where we would elevate feelings over facts? Think about it. Remember when there was that young lady, Rachel Dolezal, who identified as black, and she was leading the NAACP. Now, because of her feelings, nobody was okay with that. What about people who actually are struggling with body dysmorphic disorder or body integrity disorder, where they feel that they're supposed to be a paraplegic, or they feel that they're supposed to be blind? Do they go on and blind them? No, they try and help them. Right now, there's a gentleman in the UK who identified as Korean. So they literally he went underneath the knife to look Korean. But let's ask yourselves, does it change the nature of reality? There's actually a gentleman, he's actually around 55 years old. He identifies as Stephanie, but he refers to himself as a 6-year-old girl. Now, this man has been married. They have 7 kids together, he and his wife. Yet he identifies as what? A 6-year-old girl.
Oh my goodness.
But the reality is, when you see that man, you know that it's a man. No one is looking at him thinking, wow, that's a lovely 6-year-old girl. Nobody's thinking that. And I know I've talked about this before, but whenever I'm speaking at the universities and even high schools, students are very confused on this issue because they've been lied to. And they've been conditioned to believe that truth is whatever you feel, rather than truth corresponding to reality. So I will ask them, imagine if we were out on a trip and I said, hi, I said, I identify as a 5-year-old Chinese boy named Yao. And we were at maybe an amusement park, and there was something that happened, like an emergency. And now everyone's evacuating, and now the fire trucks are there, and they're looking for people who are missing, and they realize that I'm missing from your tour group. Now, if the fireman comes up to you and says, can you please describe who's missing from your group? How would you all describe me so that the firemen can find me and bring me back to the group? Do you know what they almost all, I've never had one get it wrong yet. None of them say, oh, Mr. Officer or Mr. Fireman, it's actually a 5-year-old Chinese boy named Yao. None of them ever say that. And when I ask them why, I'm like, how come you would not describe me as a 5-year-old Chinese boy? They're like, well, because you're not. Exactly.
And that's us as the adults in the room. We have to speak truth.
Yes.
And we have to make it okay to speak truth.
Yes.
And that I think is the big sticking point right now.
Yes.
And that's where we have to come together like this and really lift each other up in what the truth is.
Yes.
But you know what, too, Deb, is truth, but people have to know what truth is. Where is truth? Well, how come your truth is not my truth? No, there's only one truth. And so that's where we come in as Win Talk Radio and Women Impacting the Nation, we ask questions. What is important to you? What do you know? Why do you believe the way you believe? Can you articulate that? You have to know what is truth.
You have to know that
foundation. So that's really awesome, but it's amazing.
And it is important because right now we're seeing this all over. Right now in the Olympics, we have a transgender weightlifter from New Zealand. We have just recently a crowned Miss Nevada who was actually a transgender female. Now, make no mistake about it, I do not believe for a moment that the judges honestly thought that that man was more attractive than the woman. I believe they were making a statement.
Yes, yes.
And this is why we must rise up. That's why we
Take
must
action.
speak truth. And that's why we are called
Yes.
to talk truth and, like you said, take
Absolutely.
action.
Well, this is a hot topic. It's a hard topic to swallow, but we are going to stand in truth, and we are going to encourage everyone to take action. We've got one more segment coming up, and we are happy to have you back in a few minutes.
You know, Ephesians 6:13 says, "And having done all, you stand." But what are you standing for? We at Win Talk Radio, we stand for truth and facts, not emotion and conjecture. And our tagline at Win Talk Radio is talk truth and take action. So come join us, take action to save our republic, to ensure our liberty. Because remember, when we show up, we win.
Well, welcome back to Win Talk Radio with Women Impacting the Nation. We are really dissecting transgenders and the effect it has on our society. And Jannique, you had mentioned the Miss Nevada pageant, where unbelievably it was won by a man who was dressed as a woman. And so you had some thoughts and comments about, you know, what's happening to society, that we aren't all up in an uproar.
Well, all these women, and this is my humble opinion, but all these women have worked very hard. They're really into their beauty. They, you know, that whatever, for whatever reason, they want to be Miss Nevada, and they've worked really hard. And all of a sudden, this is such, to me, it's such a fraud, and of what is happening. And it's really, it's embarrassing. It's there's a word I'm looking for, and I can't think of it right this minute. But every one of those women should have walked off that stage and said, "This is for Miss Nevada. He is not a Miss. He is a Mister, and he should never be on here." It's just like, you know, as an athlete when I was younger, if a guy came on to play with me on the volleyball field or the track and field or running or, you know, just, I think we'll talk about the Olympics in a minute, but, you know, even weightlifting or anything else, if a man was allowed to be in there, I would have walked off, because that is just, it's not fair, it's not right. You have male and female, and it's just stunning to me that we are allowing, the silent majority is allowing to just kind of go along with the flow.
Although they're not necessarily, in all fairness to the contestants, some of them were interviewed and some of them did not know until after, or literally, some of them didn't know until later, because it wasn't necessarily, oh, we're now introducing Miss Nevada, who actually is a biological male. So some of them did not realize it until later on. However, that said, I do actually want to point out a couple of people who I believe are brave. I don't know, a lot of you are probably aware of a young lady named Selena Soul. And she's working with Alliance Defending Freedom along with two other young ladies who they're amazing athletes and runners. And just to your point, Sue, these girls have trained all their life. They've given up so much to become phenomenal athletes. And then what happens? Two boys who identify as girls are allowed to compete, and they take first and second place. They take first and second place, and let me tell you, almost every single time guys are competing as girls, there is injustice, and it's essentially erasing girls. It's erasing their accomplishments. In fact, it's also removing their opportunities for scholarships. It's removing their opportunities for all kinds of accolades and state championship recognition, because we have guys that are now competing as women. And one other aspect to that I think we cannot overlook. This isn't just about the private parts. When God made us, He made us uniquely male and female. And the reality is, when we go through puberty, it is not just the hormones that change. A male will always be faster. They will be physically stronger.
Well, their lung
that is
capacity,
why
their muscle
everything
capacity
is different, which is why we've always had separate sex sports. And now what they're trying to say is it's all about how you identify, as if that's going to ignore and dismiss all of the physiological changes. And so these young ladies, Selena Soul and the other young ladies, they are being bold, and they are using their voices to stand for truth and say, nope, that's not fair. Listen,
Good.
I want you to compete, but you need to compete with
equal playing field.
Yes, with the biological
And if it
males.
really is about transgenders, then let's have a second another
third
category
category, yep.
for transgenders to
Yes.
compete. And what you say about the physiological differences between male and female, I was an emergency room nurse for several years.
Sure.
And you get a patient coming in your ER that's been in a car accident, near fatal accident. You're making life and decisions very quickly. How much of a drug are you going to give this woman that's just been in this car accident? How much are you going to give for the male that's coming through? Because
point.
there are different dosages for, depending on if you're male or female, for certain life-saving drugs. You under medicate a guy who's really a guy, but you think he's a woman, they're not going to survive. The same with the male. A male comes in looking like a woman, we're going to dose him as a male and probably overdose. Nobody's got time in those split seconds. What is he? Let's look at their private parts. What are they doing? So it is impactful. It is very, very important. And we talk about conversion therapy because we know that has been, an opportunity to help these people who identify.
So here's one of the challenges right now, and this also does feed into the Equality Act, which we may talk about now or maybe on a whole other show, because this is so significant. Let's say, for example, that you're a Christian counselor, and I am a trans patient, and I come to you, and I say, listen, as a Christian, I actually want to obey God. So I'm coming to you as my counselor. I need your help. Right now, underneath the laws in several different states, even if I come to you asking you to give me biblical counsel, you are still supposed to affirm gender identity over biology and over the Word of God. So that is why this is very significant, because they're trying to pass legislation of this conversion therapy, and it's more affirmation therapy that you are supposed to affirm their gender identity
even though they're
over
crying
biology.
out for help.
Even though they're crying out for help.
No, you'll be okay. We're going to let you be
Yes.
the male or the female. And you mentioned the Equality Act, and this is important that we talk about this. It's H.R. 5. This is the Equality Act. It has passed in the House. It is open for vote in the Senate, a very, very tight vote. And the Equality Act, Sue, you always say, oh, they always name it. Sounds good. Oh, it must be good. Equality Act. This is going to impact employers. This is going to impact hospitals. This is going to impact
Even teachers. Now, real quick, what the Equality Act is essentially saying is it's comparing itself to the civil rights movement, where they're actually trying to force sexual orientation and gender identity and make it equal to, for example, skin color. So they're trying to make it the same thing and make it as if it's a civil rights issue, which we know that it isn't. But it does impact everything from the medical professionals, which means if I am a physician and I actually do mastectomies for breast cancer, well, they will now try and force me as a physician who does mastectomies to now do a mastectomy on a young lady who has healthy breast tissue but feels that she is a boy. So it really is an assault, because even if I believe that that's wrong because of my conscience and my religious beliefs, there is no religious restoration freedom. There is no sense of, well, because of your views, we will give you a pass. That's not, there is no religious exemption.
Dictating on a national level how we are going to be treating.
Yes.
How we are going to be acknowledging and having this therapy. We're affirming it.
Well, two more things that's critically important, and I'm glad you said that. I plead with you as parents. This is also critically important to you, because now they're coming after mom and dad. There are now parents that are losing custody of their kids if they do not affirm them, if they do not put them on medication, which is now why they're actually trying to circumvent parents altogether. So this is an assault on parental rights. They're also trying to force parents to transition their kids. It's actually called social transitioning at the age of 2 to 4. Then they actually have puberty blockers that are given around the age of 8 or 9. Then after that comes the cross-sex hormones, which is around age 14, and then they can actually have a sex change between 16 and 18 years of age. And a lot of this they're trying to do without, again, parental consent. So this is an assault on the family. It's an assault on the identity. It's an assault on parental rights. It's an assault on truth all around. And the very last thing, for those of you who think, oh, it can't really impact me, I'll think again. I'm pretty sure Peter Vlaming, who's actually a high school French teacher, he actually had a student in his class 2 years in a row. The first year it was a female, but then the second year the student came and said that it was male. And so Mr. Vlaming, very nice, he said, listen, I will compromise and I'll call you the name that you want, but I will not use those gender pronouns. And as a result of that, what happened? They fired him. And that's part of the problem, is how easily someone can be fired if they do not succumb to this wokeism and use pronouns. But really, freedom of speech guarantees, even if I choose to be silent. And this is an assault even on freedom of speech, but they're trying to control our thoughts. They're trying to control also then what kids are being taught. And they're even trying to control and tie the hands
And there are
of
multiple
medical
things,
professionals.
multiple things that we can do. First and foremost, call your senators. H.R. 5, tell them to vote no. If you are a parent, go to your school boards. Be aware of what is happening in your schools. If you're a consumer, I think we're all consumers, we have a second vote. If you've got businesses out there that are supporting this type of false information, this misleading information, don't go to those businesses. Don't buy their products. And I encourage you, there are things that we can do, and that's what we want you to be informed by talking truth. We want you to be able to take action. We are Women Impacting the Nation. This is Win Talk Radio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us at Win Talk Radio. For more information, contact us at womenimpactingthenation.org for questions, suggestions, or for more information, call us at 844-946-8255. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Win Talk Radio. And remember, when we show up, we win.